is up? Today's video is a response to a question that I got this week. And actually, I really should apologize. I've gotten the same question probably a dozen times over the last year, and it's taken me this long to create a response to it. So for those of you who asked it, I hope you're watching. Thank you for your patience, and hopefully this clears things up for you. So the question was specifically about the roller coaster method, or the roller coaster technique that I talk about in, periodically throughout my videos. And this is something I came up with, just for some background. What it is, it's a separation technique. It's an exit technique, and there's a ton of these out there. If you're familiar with Robert Monroe, he talks about imagining yourself as a log rolling in water until you roll out of body. If you've read Robert Bruce, he talks about the rope method, where you are climbing this imaginary rope and eventually you climb out of body. Others talk about picturing yourself in this hammock, that's rocking back and forth, and eventually that motion of going back and forth will cause separation. Well, I'll tell you, in the early days, I felt like I was watching videos and reading so many books on this, and I just felt like there was so much conflicting information. And maybe not all conflicting, but just so many different techniques and methods to try. In fact, if you read William Buhlman's book, Adventures Beyond the Body, I think he's got something like 40 techniques in there. And to be honest, it was pretty overwhelming. I just didn't know where to start. So I was just jumping from technique to technique to technique, having very little success with any of them. And at some point I slowed down and I said, what I really need to do is I need to start recording information about any of these techniques that does anything at all, so I can try to get myself on the right track and figure out at least what's going to work for me. And so I kind of started over with the whole practicing of techniques. And what I found is that, I would do the rope technique and I would start to feel these strange non-physical sensations. What I later learned were these pre-exit sensations, but they just never built into anything intense enough to generate the separation. And then I tried the hammock technique, same kind of thing. I feel these non-physical pre-exit sensations, the sense of vertigo in my chest and my head, and this intense tingling that eventually would turn into vibrations, in my limbs. And I have to say, with the Robert Monroe technique, that spinning like a log, zero success at all. And I think that that's because I don't have any frame of reference in physical life as to what it would feel like to just lay there stationary and then just spin like a log. It was a very difficult thing for me to imagine. So, I'm going through all of these techniques and I'm writing down any of them that do anything, that I feel any sort of sensations around. And then I started to look for similarities between them, because I figured there's got to be something in common with these ones that work. And what I found is that the ones that actually did something for me, they all had one thing in common, and that was the sense of motion, that they all require this movement, this full body movement. And that seemed to be, my theory was that was the key, was to be able to generate this sense of internal motion, and then that would lead at least to what I had felt so far, and hopefully something more intense down the road. So as I was feeling a little stuck one day, with this theory, I came across this video of, I think it was called Ask a Monk. And somebody asks this monk about astral projection, asks if he's ever done it and how he did it. And he says, when I was a kid, I used to meditate, and I would picture myself in a hammock, just swinging back and forth and back and forth. And this sense of motion that I would generate in my mind was a very soothing, great type of sensation to meditate to. And one day, maybe, I don't remember if it was out of boredom or what, but he decides to change the direction of his mental hammock, and he starts going forward and back instead of side to side. And then at some point, he goes higher and higher until he's doing these 360-degree rotations on this mental hammock. And it was at that point where he suddenly was ejected at high speed from his body. And I got excited about that, because I thought, here is a motion-based technique, but he's doing something to make it far more intense than anything that I have attempted. This 360-degree rotation. So I go to bed that night very excited, thinking I'm gonna nail it. I'm gonna finally have some success. And I do it, and I start out with the back and forth, and I move to the front and back. And it's very similar to what I've felt in the past. I start to feel this sense of vertigo in my chest and in my head, and it just doesn't go anywhere after that. And I have a really difficult time picturing what it feels like to go completely around in a circle. And as I'm thinking about that the next day, I think, again, it's that I have no frame of reference in physical life as to what it would feel like to be in a hammock swinging in a 360-degree rotation. That's just not something I've ever done. So trying to think along those lines, what could I do, what could I imagine that would generate that same sense of intense motion but with something that I can relate to. And the first thing I thought of was a roller coaster, and not just any roller coaster. Specifically, the one I was thinking of is called the Ring of Fire. And when you get on this roller coaster, it just goes around in a circle, maybe 4 or 5 times, and then it stops, and then it goes in reverse, and then you're going backwards through this loop 4 or 5 times, and then it's over. And so this is something I've ridden probably at least a dozen times in my life. It's something I thought I had a much better chance of being able to effectively visualize. And so, one thing that I had thought of, being the kind of the computer geek that I am, is I thought, I bet I can improve my chances if I can sort of practice this before bed. So what I did is I took my little virtual reality headset, and it's just one of these that you pop a phone into. And I went to YouTube and I found this video, this first-person perspective video of somebody riding the Ring of Fire. And so I stick my phone in my little headset, and it's like a split screen. I turn out the lights, and so this is all I can see. And I just sat there and I just watched this video on repeat over and over again for probably like an hour. And I'm just trying to memorize every point in this loop. I'm trying to memorize what it looks like when I'm looking up at the sky, and when I'm upside down looking backwards at the trees, and when I look at the crowds of people and the cars and all the other rides going down as I'm coming down the opposite side of the loop. And once I feel like I have the visual aspects of it memorized, I try to start inducing this sense of movement as I'm watching this rotation. I try to picture what it would feel like in my stomach and in my head as I'm going around this loop and coming down the opposite side. And I just do this over and over again for like an hour straight, and then I go to bed right after that. And I put my body to sleep, my normal procedure, and I'm in this void state, this free-floating state of mind. Some people call it trance. And I start doing these mental loops in this roller coaster, and it worked. Like, very first time I ever tried it, and it was scary and intense and incredible. And I start doing these loops, and I get to this point right in the back of the loop where I'm about to head down the opposite side, and right about here, I start to feel this mental tugging, this mental pressure, this mental like twinge. And it's like at the crown of my head, but back a little bit. And every time I hit that point, I feel that again. And so I try to just keep on focusing on this loop sensation. And eventually that twinging, that sensation in my head doesn't go away when I leave that part of the loop. And then it just starts building stronger and stronger. And then it turned into the vibrational state more powerfully and faster than I had ever experienced before. And before I had time to even think or freak out or anything, I was just ejected out of my body at high speed, just shot straight into the air. And that experience was over just about as quickly as it began, because leaving your body at such a high speed and just shooting straight into the air when you didn't expect it, and not having any sort of time to kind of adjust to the transition, was enough to just ruin it for me just as quick. Well, I shouldn't say ruin, end it just for me just as quickly as it began. But it confirmed to me that this sense of motion is an incredibly powerful thing. And as I was going back and I was reading some other books, and I was reading like Frank Keppel. So first we've got this monk who talks about being ejected from his body doing these rotations. And then Frank Keppel, he talks about how in the early days, this was the only way he could leave his body, was by inducing the sense of motion. And he called it this cannonball technique, where he would be shot out of his body like a cannonball and just land in some random location. And he also talks about how difficult it is when you're leaving in that abrupt manner to maintain control over the experience and actually continue it after you've landed. But even to this day, I still, half my experiences just end as quickly as they start. But one of the benefits of this is, if you are one of those people who tends to just roll out of body and you're always next to your bed and you always start out in your house, this technique will shoot you off to some remote location that you don't have any control over. I've landed in cities, I've landed in the middle of the ocean on a boat, I've landed in the middle of fields, just completely foreign places to me, and it's never something that I'm able to plan. So if you're looking for a way to just travel very quickly to some new spot, it's definitely worth a try. So that's it in a nutshell. Really, it's a motion-based visualization technique that I came up with because it was something that I could relate to physically, something that I could effectively visualize. And I mentioned one thing just sort of in passing here just a minute ago, and I'd like to emphasize this because it's important, and that is that these motion-based techniques, or any sort of separation techniques, for me personally, they don't do anything at all. They have zero effect until I am in the void state, or in this free floating state of mind, or in this it's called mind awake, body asleep. People call it the trance state. All of these different things, I think that they start at the alpha brainwave level and all the way down into theta. All of these different states that people have these various names for. Essentially, these techniques, these exit techniques and these motion-based separation techniques, they don't do anything for me until I'm in that state. But once you're in this free-floating state of mind, where you got this sort of this disassociation from your body, it is so much easier to induce a convincing sense of motion, because you need to do more than just see what it would look like if you were on a roller coaster, or see what it would look like if you were climbing a rope. You have to feel the vestibular sensations in your stomach and in your head. It's got to feel like a full body motion, not just a visualized scene, if that makes sense. And it's far easier to accomplish when you're in the void state or trance. So hopefully that answers the question. Hopefully that gives you guys the information you were looking for. If you have any more questions about this, please definitely let me know. I'll try to clarify in the future. But that's it for now. So as always, like, comment, subscribe, help me build this community, and I will talk to you guys again soon.